Take a good look at this house. To you and me, it's just a building, right? Wood, windows, a front door. But for the very few people who actually survived what happened inside, well, a single glance is enough to bring back this feeling of pure, absolute terror. This was a place where family photos were carefully staged, with terrified smiles hiding a truth so monstrous it's hard to even imagine.
You know, in the Knotek family, this wasn't just some cute saying they had hanging on a wall. It was a rule for survival. The wider you smiled for the camera, the deeper the pain was behind your eyes. This is the story of the evil that can fester and grow right behind a picture-perfect facade.
The neighbors, they saw a family. The photos, they showed happy, smiling children. But behind that closed door, it was a private prison, and it was ruled by a matriarch whose cruelty, you'll see, knew no bounds. For those who lived there, this was a house of horrors they were lucky, so lucky to escape. For others, there was no escape.
So to even begin to understand the darkness that just consumed this home, we have to go back. We have to look at how the monster at the center of it all, Shelly Knotek, was made. Because her story, it didn't start with her own family. It started with the one that broke her. Shelly's childhood reads like a blueprint for cruelty. I mean, think about it. At just 6 years old, her alcoholic mother just walks out on the family. Now, instead of protecting her two younger brothers, Shelly starts tormenting them. Then, at age 13, she finds out her mother was murdered. And just a year after that, she takes her own brand of evil to a whole new level, leveling this horrifying and completely false accusation against her own father. The lie, of course, was exposed after a medical exam. Her father was cleared, but the damage was already done. Shelly was sent away to live with her grandparents, but all she did was find new victims. The pattern of torment and manipulation, it was already set in stone. As Shelly got older, she didn't just look for victims anymore. No, she started building a family that would serve as her own personal prison. She found the perfect accomplice and began creating her own private kingdom of pain. And that's when she found David Knotek. Here was a man with such a weak personality, such a pliable will, that he didn't just fall under her spell. He completely surrendered his own identity to her. He even took her last name. He was the perfect submissive tool for the horror she was about to unleash. Together, they had 3 daughters, Nikki, Sami, and Tori. But these girls weren't raised. They were subjugated. This was way more than just abuse. It was a textbook case of what experts call coercive control. The girls were isolated. Their reality was constantly twisted, and their sense of self was just systematically destroyed. In one terrifying incident, Shelly smashed her daughter Nikki's head right through a glass door and then screamed at the bleeding child about how much it would cost to fix it. And pretty soon, the family's circle of victims started to expand. A new person came to live in the house, a boy who had nowhere else in the world to go. His name was Shane Watson. Shane was Shelly's own nephew. See, his father was in prison and his mother just couldn't handle him. He was completely vulnerable, totally alone, and he was delivered directly into the hands of his aunt, who saw, well, she didn't see a nephew. She saw a new subject to torture.
With Shane, Shelly's sadism reached horrifying new levels. I mean, she made him sleep naked outside in the freezing mud. She locked him in cages. Simple things, like using the bathroom without her permission, would result in the most brutal beatings. And by punishing him alongside her own daughters, she deepened this collective trauma, making sure they were all way too terrified to ever dream of uniting against her.
The house became this magnet for the lost and the vulnerable. To the outside world, Shelly presented herself as a savior. But the moment you crossed her threshold, you became her property. And some guests, well, they would never check out.
Kathy Loreno truly believed Shelly was her best friend. So when life dealt her really bad hand, she turned to the one person in the world she thought she could trust. And it was the last mistake she would ever make.
She'd just lost her job. She just needed a temporary place to crash. And Shelly, of course, welcomed her with open arms because she recognized that desperation. She saw that vulnerability. That's what abusers do. They are experts at spotting the perfect prey. 60 kilograms. That's over 130 pounds. And this is not a weight loss success story. It is the physical, undeniable evidence of a slow, agonizing murder.
Shelly stripped Kathy of every ounce of her dignity, forcing her to clean the house naked, starving her until she was basically a skeleton until her teeth fell out. David, always acting as Shelly's enforcer, would pour bleach on her open wounds. This went on for years, until one day in 1994, a final, savage beating left Kathy to die, all alone on a cold basement floor.
There was no panic, there was just a cold, calculated plan. Shelly and David dragged Kathy's body out to a burn barrel in the backyard and set it on fire. They scattered her ashes in the wind, and they told anyone who asked that she had just run off with some new boyfriend. They literally erased her from the world.
Inside that house, the children knew the truth. Shane Watson, who was a teenager by now, had seen what happened to Kathy. He knew he had to get out. But in Shelly's house, even something like trust could be twisted and turned into a weapon.
So Shane confided in Nikki, the daughter who had become his closest friend. He told her he had evidence and he was going to the police. But you have to understand, Nikki was trapped in what's called a trauma bond. She was so conditioned by fear, so terrified of what her mother would do, that she made a choice born not of malice, but of pure survival. She told Shelly everything.
Shelly immediately went to work on David, convincing him that his nephew was a threat who was going to send them both to prison for life. And David, ever her puppet, did the unthinkable. He took a rifle, aimed it at his own nephew, and he pulled the trigger. Shane was dead. 2 people were now dead, their ashes scattered to the wind. The daughters were trapped by an impossible weight of guilt and fear, and for years, the silence held. But Shelly wasn't finished. Her thirst for control and cruelty was absolutely bottomless. Another man, Ron Woodworth, was lured into the house. He endured months and months of sadistic torture before he too was killed in 2003. And this final death, that was the breaking point. Sometimes it takes one last unimaginable horror to finally shatter the spell. The 3 daughters, they banded together and they walked into a police station, ready to finally expose the monster. Now, to avoid a trial that would expose the full, sickening extent of their depravity, both Shelly and David took plea deals. David was sentenced to just 13 years for second-degree murder, and Shelly, the mastermind behind it all, received only 22 years for murder and manslaughter.
David served his time. But here's the most chilling fact of this entire story. Shelly Knotek was released on parole in November of 2022. She is a free woman today, which leaves us with a truly terrifying question. When a person capable of this much evil is allowed to just walk among us again, is the story ever really finished?